Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Wow. Okay. So today, I got to the microphone just in time. Today, we are going to be talking about the three primary threats to Israel and the world. And our guest is going to be talking about that. You can weigh in on the issue as well. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what he's going to present? This show is live if you're listening between 7 to 8 a.m. Holy Time right here in the land of Israel, or if it is between midnight to 1 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. That means that we are live and you can join us on the air with your comments or questions. You can also join us in the chat room. And in fact, I'm going to be going into the chat room right now. Let's go into the chat room right now. And if I'm able to see your comments and questions there, I will ask our guest. Otherwise, we'd love to have you call in. Our numbers are on our homepage at israelnewstalkradio.com at the top of the page. And again, the three primary threats to Israel and the world. And I think we're going to be talking about the riots as well that are happening not only in the United States now, but have spread to other major cities across the world, in Europe, in Australia, in they say even in Israel. I haven't really seen that much going on here in Israel, but some of the things I have to tell you are frightening. When I hear people saying that they want to dismantle and defund their police departments, they're asking for total chaos, and that will bring a situation of the most dangerous kindergarten class where the strong rule over the weak. And I'm not just talking about stealing someone's crayons. I'm talking about life and death issues. And if I were you in America or in any city or area where people are marching in the streets, burning, looting, destroying, and then saying that they want their police departments defunded, I would be very worried. I would be very, very worried. In any case, we'll be right back, everybody. Don't go anywhere.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
All right, the three primary threats to Israel and the world. And our guest today is Aaron Braunstein. He is a former U.S. Foreign Service officer. He's worked in Washington, Egypt, Tunisia, and Muslim West Africa for 30 years as part of the United States Foreign Service. Today, he heads the Jewish Covenant Alliance, and you can visit his website at www.covenantalliance.org, and we will leave a link to his website on the page where this show is podcasted. So welcome to the show, Aaron Braunstein.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back with you. A lot of things have been happening since we last talked.
Oh my. Pandemic, the world going topsy-turvy, the economy going topsy-turvy, and Iran and China and so many other things. All right. So I would like to start at what has been another pandemic. I'm just putting it that way. It's like a virus that has infected the world, and that is the people going into the streets and rioting, marching. Well, let's start out with the peaceful marchers, but then many times, unfortunately, it turns into rioting, not being peaceful, taking over things, looting, intolerance. By the way, I mean, I see reverse discrimination right now. That anybody who's white, you're already looked at as white privilege, even if you don't have any privilege. If you're a white person and you've been born in a poor family, let's even say, a white trash family, your father is nowhere to be seen, left the scene, and you're being raised by a single mother who's maybe not the most wonderful person in the world. That doesn't mean you have privilege just because your skin is white. And so that would, to me, would be reverse discrimination. And I think that both sides, ultimately, what we're looking for and what we're desiring is justice and equal opportunity on both sides. But let's just take a look now at what's happening in the news with all of the recent demands we're hearing from the people who are yelling and screaming that they want to defund the police. They want to dismantle basically their police departments. And on top of that, we're seeing things of incredible. I mean, I scratch my head when I see mayors of cities kneeling in front of black citizens of their cities. I mean, who do we kneel to? But I mean, God, right? The Jewish people kneel only basically once a year. That's on Yom Kippur, the high holiday season there. But you have the Christians who are kneeling. You have Muslims every day who go on their knees and they're praying on their knees. And now we have other mayors of cities kneeling in front of other people who are angry people. I mean, it just seems to me that the world has gone crazy, and I'm going to leave it there for you.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I think the situation is more difficult, more dangerous than anything I remember from over the last 50 years. Just as a bit of an anecdote, a small story, I served 3 months on special detail in Vietnam in 1967. And I came back to the States in May. June was the Six-Day War. And in the beginning of 1968, Martin Luther King was murdered, and I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time on assignment, home-based assignment, and I saw the riots that ensued from the murder of Martin Luther King with people know Washington, 14th Street, 12th Street, 15th Street, all on fire. And I was on the 6th floor of my apartment building, and I saw the whole thing from my window. And the city was smoldering. And what we have now is even worse than what happened then. The basic fundamentals of society are being questioned, law enforcement, etc. But always remember, these are fringe elements. Whatever they're going to say, and the more extreme statement they come out with is going to be the next day headline in the major newspapers of America. So one has to take this with a grain of salt and realize the situation is bad enough without these extremists.
But Aaron, you talk about a fringe element.
Try to ride piggyback on what's happening in the States.
Okay, but Aaron, you talk about a fringe element, but that's all you need sometimes to take over a society. People who are willing to go out into the streets with guns and start being violent, where most citizens are not violent. Most citizens will be cowering and sealing themselves up in their homes to protect their wives and children and their families. And all you need is a fringe element. Look at Hitler. He was a fringe element. All you need is a
Absolutely.
violent fringe element in order to take over a society. Just enough of them. You don't need the majority. You just need enough.
Well, that's very true. And when you compound that with economic collapse, health fear with the coronavirus, everything that's happening now, it's very ominous. And that's what makes it dangerous for both America and for the world, for that matter, because the only stalwart standing in front of the forces of evil in the world, and I put on the first rank of that Iran, they're gloating now with regard to what's happening in America, questioning the very legitimacy of the American federal system. And if you have radical anarchists in the United States doing the same thing, what you're probably going to get, though, is a counter-reaction. Law and order usually wins the day.
It's whoever has the guns wins the day.
Well, the government has the guns. And there are enough people with guns on both sides.
Yeah, but some people in the government are the ones that are egging this on. A lot of these radical Democrats who are these anarchists themselves or hate America and want to destroy it and do everything in their power to make sure that Trump is not reelected. They're willing to they've said it before. They're willing to destroy the economy and have Americans lose jobs in order to get power again and to get Trump out and get power again.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the dangers in America today, is this almost biological hatred of the president. The old saying, if you really engage in hatred, you're really, first off, are going to destroy yourself before you destroy the object of your hatred. And that's very, very dangerous psychologically. And the implications for the world, I was 30 years dealing with international affairs around the world, from Asia to North Africa to the Middle East. And the first question people ask is, whither America? Quo vadis America? Where's America headed? And can we rely on America? And is America preoccupied? And should we take advantage of that? And maybe there's a miscalculation. And before you know, you have all-out war in the Middle East, in the Arabian Gulf. I always say Arabian Gulf and not Persian Gulf. And it's very dangerous. And to the extent that America is Israel's greatest ally, greatest friend, and never before has it been displayed to such a degree, still, the question is, where is America going to be with one challenge after another? So it's very dangerous. And also it's very dangerous for the Jews of America. What's happening, the anti-Semitism that has grown with the coronavirus on the social media is unbelievable. And not myself, but Bougie Herzog, the head of the Jewish Agency, he said the great danger now in America is that when the corona lock-in is lifted, then some of this anti-Semitism will move from social media into the streets of America, to the front of synagogues and Jewish establishments. And the 6-part series, The Plot Against America, just aired in the States and also here in Israel. I highly recommend it. A what-if scenario. Where would America have gone in the 1930s if Roosevelt would not have been reelected, etc. So everything is very, very touch and go now. And, the Anglo-Saxon real estate company always had as its symbol, as its motto, your foothold in Israel. So I would recommend for any American Jews who are starting to think seriously about Israel for the future of their family and their children and grandchildren, I think they should think about getting some foothold in Israel. Buy a
Amen.
little
So
property,
let's stop here.
etc.
Let's stop here for a minute because we're going to a break, and I'm going to ask you, where is America headed now, and the rest of the world as well? And will these countries that are having this internal revolution be considered and perceived as weak, and perhaps even ripe for some type of takeover? We'll be right back.
Absolutely.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
So we're talking today about the three primary threats to Israel and the world. Our guest is Aaron Bronstein, who is a former U.S. Foreign Service officer, and he's here talking to us about these latest news items. And Aaron, before the last segment, I was asking you, with all that's going on today, and we're seeing the riots in the street, we're talking about half of the I won't say half of the population in numbers, but one side of the population being considered by another side of the population as having white privilege, and the other ones, racism is a huge, huge issue, and it should be. There should not be racism. I think that both sides are looking ultimately for justice. But where is America headed now with all these calls now for defunding their police departments? So who's going to keep law and order in these places, and especially in these big major cities where crime is usually higher than in the smaller cities? And also, will America and other countries where this might be growing and taking place, this political pandemic, I should call it, are they headed for other countries to see that they are weak and ready to pounce on?
Yes, absolutely. That's the danger. And I think, however, on the other side, that there's already a counter-reaction to the chaos that has been growing and the anarchy that has been growing in American cities. And the reaction usually is to go a little bit to the other side, to the other extreme. And but it seems right now things are settling down. The violence has subsided. I think the leaders of the protests, those who are not anarchists, burn, baby, burn. I don't know how many of your viewers remember the slogans from the 60s, burn, baby, burn. But internationally, there's a big question as to whether America is not going to flinch in a moment of confrontation. And of course, the hot spot is in the Arabian Gulf. I mentioned earlier, I prefer to say Arabian Gulf. All the coasts of the Gulf are populated by Arabs, whether in Arabia or in Iran. And it's a hot spot right there that could explode any time. And if the Ayatollahs think that they can pull something and America will not react, I think they're going to be shocked to learn that the United States most likely will react and react with force. And the only thing that keeps some kind of element of stability is that the Ayatollahs think Trump is crazy. and they don't know what he's going to do from one day to the next.
A lot of Americans think that Trump is crazy.
And that's maybe the fact that people think that in the hotspots around the world is probably all for the good. Keep them guessing, keep them on their toes and worrying about what the American reaction may be. I should say also, a lot of people are waiting for Trump to be defeated in the coming elections. And I think what's happening actually strengthens his political hand. And he will be reelected. And in fact, the current riots, to the extent they have become violent and against the basic principle of the Bible, the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. He went to church and held the Bible in his hand outside the church with a very simple message. Do not murder and do not kill and do not steal. And I think when I say the three major threats to Israel and America and the world are Iran, and we have to keep our eye on that ball and not be diverted from realizing, like in real estate, you say location, 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 whereas today in international politics, it's Iran, and Iran.
All right, so tell our listeners why. Why do you believe it's Iran?
Because it's a sovereign country that is working on nuclear Holocaust destruction for nuclear weaponry, working with North Korea, threatening the entire Sunni Arab world with its fanatical brand of Shiism, trying to destroy Saudi Arabia, take over the Gulf and the Gulf states, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and the Persians of Iran are ready to die to the last Arab, and they're proving it in Syria. So it's an old story of imperial reach.
I had a guest on yesterday, Aaron, who was saying that China is the one that is to be looked at right now because their economy is so affected by the pandemic and also by U.S. President Donald Trump, and they're a danger. What do you have to say about that?
China is definitely a danger, but the one difference is that they're not guided by some kind of fanatical, religious, theological imperative to take over the world, like the Soviet Union was. And the only way that was controlled by MAD, mutual assured destruction. Mutual destruction, nuclear destruction, kept the world from going to the brink. China is trying to expand its imperial reach, and it's doing it very heavily in the South China Seas in terms of trying to take over control and against all the other countries in the area, Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, of course, even conflict with Malaysia. So the countries of Southeast Asia are well aware of the Chinese threat, but it's not of the same cloth as the Iranian threat, because you could have a situation in which the Ayatollahs say, Armageddon now. It's time for their Mahdi to appear, and they're being called by Allah. They're being called by God to confront the great Satan, America, and destroy the little Satan, Israel. And that's one of the dangers in the current corona epidemic, which is affecting Iran to a great extent, much more than is being publicized, because the government there controls statistics and decides what will be revealed and what will not. They may think that it's doomsday time. There are enough fanatics there, especially the Revolutionary Guard, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, that is a real danger. That they should be the first target of any overt or covert action vis-a-vis Iran, with the hope that maybe the military will take over the country because of the against the Praetorian Guard that protects the emperor, the Ayatollah emperor. If you know a little bit of ancient history, the only bulwark of the Ayatollahs is the Revolutionary Guard, not the military, because it functions internally, but also externally. It's in direct competition with the Iranian military. So everything should be focused, and this means in terms what Israel and America is busy with. If we're busy with other things and not with Iran, diverting attention from the Iranian threat, then that's very, very bad.
And I just want to reiterate here that when I talk about China, when I talk about Iran, when I talk about any of these places, I want to reiterate that I'm not talking about the Chinese people want to take over the world or the Iranian people, but the governments, their leadership right now. It's very important. I think that the more communication that there is through the internet, through social media, through people connecting, the more people want to be together, but there are still governments that are very, very greedy, that they have their agendas and they're drafting their people into armies and they're bringing their people to do these things. So we have to try to work in a way where we can reach the people to be able to overthrow their oppressive governments that are taking away their rights, that are bringing them into unjust wars and things like that. So we don't hate the Chinese, God forbid. The Chinese people did not want to spread any pandemic. We still don't have any proof where this came from, but if it was on purpose, then you have to look at the government and not at the Chinese people. They were dying too, the Chinese people. So I just want to leave that there. All right, we're going to be going to a break, Aaron. So when we get back in 5 seconds, where do you want to take us?
Well, I think we should talk about the so-called annexation.
Very good thing. That's what we're talking about here in Israel.
It ties in with Iran.
All right. We'll be right back, everybody. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about the three primary threats to Israel and the world. And our guest is Aaron Braunstein, who is a former U.S. Foreign Service officer, and he is also the head of the Jewish Covenant Alliance at covenantalliance.org. So, Aaron, we want to talk now about something that's in the news as well, more of a domestic issue here in Israel and something between the relationship between U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and that is the idea of annexation or applying sovereignty to Jewish land in Judea and Samaria. And according to the peace plan that Trump has made, which a lot of people are very unhappy with because it calls for a Palestinian state as well. But you wanted to weigh in on that issue of annexation or applying sovereignty.
Yes, absolutely. And the issue, first of all, to remove any confusion about it, we're not really talking about annexation. Whatever may come out of the Israeli government, no one knows what we're going to get in terms of a Knesset law. But if you take the real matter at hand is applying Israeli law to ex-territory. It's not a question of sovereignty or annexation. The Golan Heights law from 1981 did not mention the word annexation at all, did not mention the word sovereignty at all, and it did not mention those words on purpose. The law extended, the Knesset law applied Israeli law, Israeli civil law, to the Golan Heights. It didn't do anything more than that. And that's what is really being talked about. I think the left is jumping on the word of annexation because they want to defeat any kind of action that the unity government might take with regard to changing the legal status in undefined territories of Judea and Samaria. But the bigger picture is that all of this is very much a diversion from the real issue, and the real issue is the threat of Iran. And I say the three major threats are Iran, Iran, and Iran, just like we say in real estate, that the three important things in selecting a property is location, location, location. And anything that deflects and preoccupies us and preoccupies the world makes a unified national and international struggle against Iran. The Ayatollahs in Iran, the Ayatollah regime in Iran that has co-opted the population. By the way, only half the population is about half the population is not Persian at all. And in 1935, the change of the name of the state from Persia to Iran was meant to confuse people about that, to say, no, everybody in Iran is an Iranian. But that's an oxymoron. Of course, everybody in Fiji is a Fijian, But the reality of Iran is an internal empire that's now moved to become an external empire. And they have the potential for nuclear weaponry. And they're working throughout the Middle East to destroy Sunni Islam. And the Arab countries that are all Sunni, the only sovereign Shia state in the Middle East is Iran. And they're in alliance with Israel, and talk about annexation on Judea and Samaria, the west bank of the Jordan River, is just undermining that relationship to one degree or another. And that's exactly, we should be strengthening that relationship and not weakening. The whole talk about doing something now with regard to Judea and Samaria is totally out of place and time. And people say, but maybe Trump will not be reelected, and then what are we going to have where this is a golden opportunity? Well, one has to weigh the cost involved, like with any decision. And to tell you the honest truth, based on the way things are going now, the election of Biden as the Democratic candidate, I doubt very much whether Trump is going to be defeated in November for two basic reasons. The issue, he will make the issue of law and order primary, and the majority of Americans will go for law and order.
Okay, Aaron, let me stop you here because we have a caller. We have joining us David from the occupied territories of Chicago. Hi there, David.
Hi, Tamar. I've really enjoyed your guest. Aaron, I have a question I want you to flesh out. With these new events like the Jordan River, taking over the territory control, and the aggressiveness of Iran, how do you see that Damascus prophecy fulfilled, where it becomes a ruinous heap? It seems to me like that could be any day now, but I was wondering, how do you see that developing? And thank you.
Yes. Well, I tell you, the geopolitics of the Tanakh, of the Bible, are a subject for 10 hours of discussion. Look, it's all there. It's all a question, as we say, it's all a question of commentary and interpretation. The threat from the north, and yet in Isaiah, very clearly states, Egypt, my people, Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. So these countries are all potential allies of Israel. Some of them already allies, like Egypt. The depth of security cooperation with Egypt and with Saudi Arabia and with other countries is phenomenal. And people are going to say, but look, they'll scream and they'll object to so-called annexation. But in the end, their security interest will dominate. Well, psychology doesn't always work that way. They have what's known as a street to pacify, the so-called Arab street, especially Jordan, where the majority is Palestinian. And once Bibi, Prime Minister Netanyahu, was asked, what about Jordan is Palestine? He says, the last thing we need is a Jordanian and Jordan in the hands of Hamas. We have enough problems with Gaza in the hands of Hamas. We're now going to have Jordan in the hands of Hamas. So, he doesn't say sovereignty. He doesn't say Jordan is Palestine. And he knows what he's saying. And so let's keep our eye on the essential issues today and not blow this whole thing into so-called annexation into a world crisis. Clearly, the left in Israel...
Aaron, we only have a minute left, so I need you to wrap everything up. What do you want us to go away with today? You say that Iran is the threat to the world.
I think, first of all, go to our website. There are many articles there that have been published on Iran, on the question of Jewish mission to the nations. It's all from a Jewish perspective, us to them, as we can say. Covenantalliance.org. Go to my article in Google, Trump and Aliyah. Go to another published article, the U.S. Marines in Jerusalem, and see what kind of message we're sending out to the Jewish people around the world and to the entire world itself. The issues have to be made very clear, and for us not to be confused by attempts on the left and also by anti-Israel forces to change the agenda and to make something appear that does not really exist.
All right. So basically, Iran, you're saying, is a huge threat that they're taking advantage. Well, any country would take advantage of any type of pandemic, whether it's political pandemic, as we're seeing today, spreading, or a health one.
Absolutely. And we have to have more measures to undermine the regime in Iran. And we have to get either that we have a way to strengthen the Iranian military against the Revolutionary Guards, primarily by whittling down the Revolutionary Guards. It's being done in Syria today. It has to be expanded in Syria and around the world, and not to have the whole world busy with us rather than with Iran. I mean, that's not the way you handle international diplomacy.
All right. Aaron Bronstein, thank you very much. And again, if anybody wants to go read more articles on these topics, you can go to his website at covenantalliance.org. Thanks for being with us.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.